Russia-Ukraine news. Neutral Putin's forces are receiving helicopters, drones, and essential raw materials from China. According to The Telegraph, China is supplying Russia with a wide variety of military hardware, such as helicopters, drones, optical sights, and key metals used in the defense industry. China insists it is neutral and has denied sending weapons to Russia ever since that country launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. According to research conducted by The Telegraph, however, the country has sent thousands of shipments to Russian firms that produce military hardware. According to the report, Western efforts to weaken Russia's economy through sanctions may be thwarted by Chinese shipments. The report predicts that this year's trade between the two countries will break the record of $200 billion. Unmanned aerial vehicles, rotorcraft, and scopes. The Telegraph, citing data from open-source research firm Molfar, reported that 2 months before the war started, a Chinese toy wholesaler named Shantou Honghu Plastics sent 1,000 drones to the Russian firm Samsung. Chinese companies HEMS 999 and Tianjin Huarong Aviation sent helicopters to Russia as the conflict escalated. According to the report, over 50 Russian companies have received shipments of optical sights from their Chinese counterparts. According to the report, many of the items came from a company called Yiwu Woji Optics Instrument under the guise of hunting equipment, but they were actually suitable for use in military weapons. The report goes on to note that Russia is receiving significant quantities of raw materials that can be used in the production of arms, such as titanium alloys and magnesium alloys, which are also used in the production of aircraft. According to PBS, China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang stated in April that China adopts a prudent and responsible attitude when it comes to the export of military items. To paraphrase the Chinese government, China will not provide weapons to relevant parties of the conflict, and will manage and control the exports of dual-use items in accordance with laws and regulations. Putin has been thrown a lifeline by China. In the same vein, China has used loopholes to supply Russia with non-lethal but militarily useful equipment. China is betting on the West's desire to avoid a confrontation with a major global power by sending dual-use equipment that could have civilian applications. In one example cited by Politico, Chinese firm Shanghai H-Win sold hundreds of thousands of bulletproof vests and helmets to Russian buyers, according to customs records. However, Cold War historian Sergei Radchenko argued in an opinion piece for The New York Times that Putin should be wary of putting too much faith in China, because the country has a history of betraying allies when it serves their interests. However, China is still reaping benefits from the partnership and is therefore unlikely to withdraw its support anytime soon. She began her campaign in the 1970s to prevent the Wilmslow Road bypass scheme from destroying hundreds of homes in her hometown of Withington. She started out as a curious onlooker, but eventually rose to the highest ceremonial office in the city after being elected as a Liberal councillor. She also founded a newspaper and wrote books in addition to being a political figure. She was at the pinnacle of her political career when she dined with Vladimir Putin at a state banquet. Lord Mayor of Manchester in 2003-2004, Alderman Audrey Jones, has passed away at the age of 90. She was born in Manchester in 1933 and spent most of her life there before being evacuated to Derbyshire for the duration of the war. She sold advertising for her new newspaper, the South Manchester Reporter, and hired Robert Waterhouse, a journalist for The Guardian, to serve as its editor. In 1978, a member of the Liberal Party, later the Liberal Democrats, was elected to represent Manchester's Withington ward on the city council. She was the first Liberal to be elected to the council in the modern era, but her party quickly gained more seats. Along with her 23 years as a magistrate, she also served as president of the Ladybarn Garden Society and as a governor of Maldith Road School. 50 years after she was evacuated as a child, in 1989, she published a book called Farewell Manchester in which she and other members of her generation shared their stories from the war. Up until 2006, she served as a councilwoman and on other public boards, such as the Greater Manchester Fire Authority. Stephen, her son, recalled that during World War II, she and her sister Barbara were taken by their ARP, air raid precautions, warden father, Arthur Williams, to play with the Kindertransport children, Jewish refugees who lived in the house next door to the ARP house on Heaton Road. Some of them she saw again during her time as Lord Mayor, years later. She had a job in the pharmaceutical industry in the early 1950s and came to the conclusion that even aspirin was unsafe during pregnancy. She was offered a new wonder drug for morning sickness in the late 1950s, but she declined. Birth defects were later linked to thalidomide, the drug in question. Councillor Helen Jones was the consort of her mother, Councillor Jones, during her time as Lord Mayor. According to Stephen, she loved every minute of it, including drinking champagne in the Ugly Sisters dressing room after watching Cinderella. The trip to St. Petersburg for the tercentenary of the city, with which Manchester had a friendship agreement, was another highlight. However, the agreement has since been suspended due to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. After being diagnosed with cerebellar atrophy, her health deteriorated to the point where she had to leave politics in 2006. To receive stem cell therapy at the Shenzhen Bake Cell Engineering Research Institute, she went to China in 2008. She spent her final years in a Quarlton nursing home, where she passed away on August 8 at the age of 90. The funeral will be held on Monday, August 21 at 2 p.m. at St. Paul's Church on Wilmslow Road in Withington. Her late husband Ray was a retired educator. Helen, Stephen, Christopher, and Graham are her 4 adult children. She also leaves behind 5 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Helen reminisces, "When Mum told me she was going to be Lord Mayor, she'd said, 'Your dad doesn't fancy being Lady Mayoress. Will you do it?' And I'm so happy that I did say yes." Serving the city alongside her and witnessing her impact on others, especially the youth, was an honor. She set a good example, made life enjoyable, and we were all very proud to call her Mom. The funeral for Councilman Jones will be held on Monday, August 21 at 2 p.m. at St. Paul's Church on Wilmslow Road in Withington.